The energy from the ancient weapon surged through Earth, but no one could predict the consequences. As the device hummed with power, its effects began to ripple across the planet. The atmosphere itself seemed to shift, as if the very air had become charged with the weapon's energy. Captain Jace Farron stood before it, his heart racing. The weapon had been activated, but he could feel the weight of what they had unleashed. "Is it working?" one of the scientists asked, his voice trembling as he scanned his equipment. The readings were off the charts, and none of them knew exactly what to expect. The device was more than a weapon. It was a force, an unknown power that they had only begun to understand. As they waited, Captain Farron's mind raced. The Xiran forces were already advancing, their warships casting dark shadows over Earth. If the weapon failed, humanity would be finished. The final stand would be their last. But if it succeeded, they might have a fighting chance. For hours, nothing happened. Then, without warning, the ground began to tremble. The hum of the device grew louder, the energy pulsing like a heartbeat. Farron's team had to brace themselves against the sudden force, unsure of what was coming next. They had no way of stopping it now. The sky outside darkened as the device activated fully, and in that moment, the Xiran felt it too. Their massive warships above Earth suddenly began to flicker. Their advanced technology, once unbeatable, began to glitch and stutter. The Xiran commanders scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The device had done something none of them had expected. The power it unleashed was more than a weapon. It was a disruption, a force that scrambled the very essence of Xiran technology. On Earth, the resistance forces felt the effects immediately. The humans, despite their weakened position, began to rally. The device had disrupted the Xiran's communications and weapon systems, giving Earth's forces an unexpected advantage. The tide of battle was turning, but the victory came at a heavy cost. Captain Farron knew that the weapon was not just a tool for war. It was something more, something ancient, and now it was starting to take its toll on Earth itself. The strange energy from the device was spreading, causing strange changes to the planet. It wasn't just the Xiran that were affected. Earth itself was beginning to shift, its natural balance disrupted. Farron felt the power within himself too. The longer he stayed near the device, the more he could feel it changing him. His body was adapting to the energy, just as it had done with the first Xiran encounter. But this time the change was different. He was becoming something else, something beyond human. The transformation was painful, but it was also empowering. Farron knew that he could no longer turn back. The weapon had awakened something inside him, and it was the only way he could fight the Xiran to the very end. The captain turned to the team, his face etched with determination. "We've opened a door we can't close, but we've got a chance now. We need to take it." As Earth's defenders launched their final assault, the Xiran's once dominant forces began to crumble. Their warships, now disoriented and crippled by the weapon's disruption, fell from the sky one by one. But as the humans celebrated their newfound hope, they knew the price for their survival was yet to be fully paid. Captain Farron felt the changes deep within. Earth was saved, at least for now, but the cost was high. And as he looked up at the stars, he realized that the fight for Earth had only just begun. The true power of the weapon had been unlocked, and there was no telling what it would bring in the future. In this part, the ancient weapon begins to turn the tide of the war against the Xiran, but it comes with unexpected consequences. As Earth's forces gain an advantage, Captain Farron experiences a transformation that might change him forever. The humans have a fighting chance, but the price of victory is becoming clearer by the moment. As the war on Earth raged on, the effects of the ancient weapon grew stronger, and Captain Jace Farron found himself grappling with changes he could not explain. The device had given humanity a fighting chance against the Xiran, but the power it unleashed was not without consequence. The energy from the weapon had begun to alter everything it touched, including Farron himself. The captain had felt it, first in the quiet moments after the device activated. At first it was subtle, an odd tingle in his fingertips, a faint pulse in his chest. But the longer he stayed near the device, the more intense the sensations became. His body was changing, adapting to the power that coursed through the planet. The strength he had felt before, in the early days of the war, was nothing compared to what he now experienced. His senses were heightened, his physical abilities were enhanced, but there was a growing unease in his mind. Farron had always been a man of logic and reason, a soldier who depended on strategy and careful planning. But now, as the energy of the weapon took hold of him, his thoughts felt more chaotic. It was as if something deep within him was being unlocked, and it was not entirely human. The power was coursing through his veins, making him feel stronger, more capable than ever before. But at the same time, it was making him feel less like himself. He could feel the weight of the transformation pressing on him as he walked through the underground facility where the weapon was stored. The team of scientists who had helped activate the device were now watching him with concerned eyes, but none dared to speak. They had seen the power of the device firsthand, and they knew that what it had done to Farron was not something anyone could fully understand. "Captain, we need to talk," one of the scientists, Dr. Lena Harris, said, cautiously. She was the lead scientist on the project, and she had been closely monitoring the captain's condition since the device was activated. "There's something happening to you. The changes, they're not just physical. Your mind, it's different." Farron turned to face her, his expression hardening. "I know," he replied quietly, his voice distant. "But we're winning, Lena, and that's all that matters." He could feel the weight of his words. He had always fought for the greater good, but now, with the power of the weapon running through him, he wondered if he had truly understood what it meant to sacrifice for that cause. Was it worth it? Was humanity's survival worth the price of losing his very humanity? Dr. Harris stepped closer, her voice filled with urgency. "Captain, you're becoming something else. You're not the man we knew. If this continues, we don't know what you'll become." Farron's eyes softened for a moment as he looked at the scientist, but then the surge of energy within him flared again. His thoughts blurred for a moment as a strange calmness washed over him. He felt powerful, untouchable, but it was also frightening. "I have to finish this," he said, his voice distant. "We can't afford to stop now. Not after everything we've sacrificed." The Xiran were still fighting back, and although Earth had gained some ground, the war was far from over. Farron could feel the end approaching, but the path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty. He knew one thing for certain: he could not walk away from this fight. Not now, not after everything humanity had endured. But as he looked at the faces of his team, the nagging feeling in the back of his mind grew stronger. Was this transformation truly a gift, or had they unleashed something that could destroy them all? The power from the weapon had changed Earth, and now it was changing him. The fight for survival was no longer just about defeating the Xiran. It was about what humanity was willing to become to protect their home. Captain Jace Farron stood at the edge of the battlefield, watching as the remnants of Earth's military and civilian resistance gathered for what would likely be the final confrontation with the Xiran. The power of the ancient weapon had shifted, the tide, but at a heavy cost. Earth's cities were in ruins, and the survivors had been pushed to their limits. Yet despite everything, they had not surrendered. The humans had fought back against the Xiran with a spirit that even the most advanced alien forces could not break. But now, the time had come for the last stand. The Xiran warships hovered above, dark shadows blotting out the sun. Their weaponry was intact, and their soldiers were relentless. The Galactic Council had sent a fleet to aid Earth, but the Xiran had responded with overwhelming force. It was clear that Earth's only hope now lay in the hands of the survivors who had endured so much in the strange, powerful weapon that Captain Farron had unleashed. Farron could feel the strange power coursing through him, his senses sharper, his strength greater. But it came at a cost. Every day, the changes within him grew more pronounced. He was no longer just a human. He was something else, something beyond. His once steady mind now swirled with thoughts he could barely control. The transformation had begun to consume him, but as he looked out across the battlefield, he knew he had no choice but to keep going. The humans needed him, and he would not let them down. "We can't wait any longer," Farron said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of what was to come. His voice echoed through the makeshift command center where soldiers and commanders gathered. "We've lost too many already. It's time to take the fight directly to them." Dr. Lena Harris, who had been monitoring his condition closely, stepped forward, her face etched with concern. "Captain, you're not the same. The changes, they're dangerous. You don't know what you're doing to yourself." Farron turned to face her, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. "I know what I'm doing, Lena, and I'm the only one who can stop this." The humans had built a plan around the ancient weapon, but they had to act fast. The Xiran would not wait forever. Their forces were closing in and the human defenses were spread thin. The power from the device had given Earth's military a fighting chance, but it was not enough to hold back the Xiran forever. As the final battle began, the humans launched their last offensive. Fighter jets, tanks, and infantry clashed with the Xiran forces, while Farron led the charge from the front. His enhanced abilities made him faster and stronger than ever before, and he cut through the Xiran lines with ease. But with each strike, he felt the power inside him growing more intense, more uncontrollable. The Xiran commanders, realizing that their defeat was imminent, ordered a full-scale assault. They launched everything they had left in an attempt to crush the humans once and for all, but they had underestimated the one thing that had kept Earth in the fight: human determination. Even in the face of destruction, the humans pressed forward, refusing to give up. Farron fought alongside them, but he was losing himself. The power of the weapon was consuming him, and he knew that if he didn't act soon, he might not be able to control it. The time had come to make the ultimate sacrifice. He knew that the only way to truly end the war and save humanity was to use the weapon's full potential, even if it meant losing himself forever. The final moments of the battle were a blur. The Xiran forces began to fall, their warships crashing to the ground, their soldiers retreating in defeat. But as Earth's forces gained the upper hand, Farron could feel the energy inside him reach its peak. His body burned with power, and the world around him seemed to fade. In one final, desperate act, Farron activated the full force of the weapon. A blinding flash of light erupted from the device, and the entire battlefield was consumed by the wave of energy. The Xiran forces were decimated in an instant, their technology rendered useless. The weapon's power had shattered the Xiran's grip on Earth, but at the cost of everything Farron had become. As the dust settled and the survivors began to gather, the war was over. The Xiran had been defeated, and humanity had survived. But the price of victory had been steep. Captain Farron was gone, lost to the very power that had saved them all. Humanity was left to rebuild, but they would never forget the price they had paid to protect their home. In this part, the final battle against the Xiran unfolds. The humans, led by Captain Farron, make their last stand with the help of the ancient weapon. The stakes are high, and Farron must make the ultimate decision to save humanity, even if it means losing himself in the process. The story reaches its dramatic climax as Earth's forces triumph, but the cost of victory is clear. In the aftermath of the battle, the war-torn landscape of Earth began to settle into a silence that felt almost unnatural. The once great cities were now ruins, and the skies were dotted with the wreckage of destroyed Xiran warships. The Xiran forces, the deadliest species humanity had ever encountered, were defeated and their invasion was over. Yet for those who had fought to protect Earth, the victory felt bittersweet. Captain Jace Farron was gone. The power of the ancient weapon had consumed him, taking him far beyond what any human could endure. He had saved Earth, but at what cost? The energy from the device had surged through his body, changing him into something unrecognizable. In the final moments when the weapon's full power was unleashed, Farron had sacrificed himself to ensure the Xiran were driven away for good. He had become a part of the weapon itself, a force of energy that had given Earth its chance to survive. The survivors, human soldiers and civilians alike, were left in the wake of the destruction. They had won, yes, but they had also lost so much. The streets were filled with grief, but also with hope. Hope that they could rebuild, that humanity could rise from the ashes of the war and rebuild their world. But it was clear that the path ahead would not be easy. Dr. Lena Harris, one of the lead scientists who had worked on the weapon, stood among the survivors. She had known Farron better than most, and she couldn't shake the feeling of loss. She had watched as the captain transformed before her eyes, as the power of the device took him further and further from the man she had once known. Now, all that was left of him was his sacrifice. The survivors looked to her, not only for answers but for guidance. The human race had faced a threat unlike anything they had ever imagined, and they had come through it. But at what price? In the weeks that followed, the world began to rebuild. The nations of Earth, once divided, came together to help each other heal and repair what had been broken. The human spirit, unbroken by the horrors of war, began to shine again. It was clear that humanity had faced something terrible and had come out stronger because of it. Yet Dr. Harris often found herself staring at the sky, wondering about the fate of Captain Farron. Had he truly been lost? Or was there something more to the weapon's power that they had yet to understand? She couldn't shake the feeling that the captain in some way was still watching over them, still part of the world he had saved. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Dr. Harris stood on a high hill overlooking the ruined city. She felt something, an energy, a presence, something she couldn't explain. It was as if the very air around her was charged with an invisible force. The feeling was both comforting and unsettling, and she realized in that moment that Captain Farron might not be gone after all. The weapon's power had changed him, but perhaps it had also transformed him into something new, something beyond human, something that still had a role to play in Earth's future. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Dr. Harris allowed herself a moment of peace. She didn't know what the future held for humanity, but one thing was certain: Earth had survived, and its people would keep fighting, no matter what. Challenges lay ahead. And somewhere out there, Captain Farron's legacy lived on, a reminder of the strength of humanity and the sacrifices made to protect the world they loved. Months passed, and the world slowly began to recover from the devastation of the Zirin War. The scars on Earth's surface were deep, but humanity's spirit had proven to be unbreakable. Cities that once lay in ruins were now bustling with life again. People rebuilt their homes, planted new crops, and worked together to heal the land. The war, which had nearly torn their world apart, had also brought them closer than ever before. Dr. Lena Harris stood at the front of a new research facility, looking out over the vibrant city below. The facility was part of Earth's effort to understand the true nature of the ancient weapon that had saved them. The scientists had spent months studying the technology behind the device, but it was clear that much of its power remained a mystery. What was even more unsettling was the strange energy that lingered in the air, the energy that Captain Farron had absorbed before his final sacrifice. The memory of Farron still haunted Lena. She had worked closely with him, and she couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow still out there. After all, the weapon's power had fused with him in ways they didn't fully understand. Lena had seen how the captain had changed over time, becoming something more than human. The transformation had been gradual, but by the time the final battle had arrived, he had been different, stronger, faster, almost otherworldly. But he had paid the ultimate price to save Earth, and with his sacrifice he had vanished. But lately, Lena had begun to notice strange occurrences. The energy in the air was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. It was subtle at first, an electric charge in the atmosphere, a strange feeling when she stood near the old weapon's remains. Then one evening, as she walked through the facility, she felt it again, a presence. She paused, sensing something she couldn't explain. It was like a whisper in her mind, a familiar feeling that made her heart race. "Captain?" she whispered into the stillness, her voice barely audible. The air around her seemed to hum, in response. She quickly shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was impossible. Farron had given everything to end the war. He couldn't still be here. But deep down, a part of her refused to believe he was truly gone. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring out at the stars, The feeling of the captain's presence had only grown stronger, like a force drawing her toward something. There was no logical explanation for it, but something told her that the weapon's power had not completely left Earth. It had changed, Farron, yes, but it had also changed something within the very fabric of reality itself. She couldn't shake the feeling that Farron had become a part of the world, a part of something greater than themselves. The next day, Lena returned to the research facility, determined to find out more. As she worked late into the evening, analyzing data and testing the energy signatures, she stumbled upon something extraordinary. The readings from the weapon were unlike anything they had seen before. They weren't just traces of energy, they were patterns, almost like a blueprint, a message encoded within the power itself. And then, in the midst of her work, it happened. The lights flickered and the air seemed to thicken around her. The temperature dropped, and for a moment she felt a familiar presence, strong, warm, and undeniably human. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as a voice, soft but clear, echoed in her mind. "Lena, I'm still here." Lena gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. It couldn't be. But the voice was unmistakable. It was Farron. He was gone. But somehow he wasn't. The weapon had done something to him, and now it was clear. Captain Farron had become part of Earth's future, and in some way he was still watching over them. Tears welled up in Lena's eyes as she stood there, feeling the weight of everything they had lost and everything they had gained. The fight was over, but this was just the beginning. Humanity had survived, and they would continue to thrive. But they would never forget the man who had given everything to save them. And somewhere, in the quiet hum of the energy that still flowed through Earth, Captain Jace Farron's legacy lived on. In this part, Earth's recovery is underway, but the presence of Captain Farron lingers. Lena, still haunted by his memory, begins to realize that his transformation into something greater may not have ended with his death. The discovery of strange energy signatures points to Farron's enduring influence, suggesting that while the war has ended, the journey for humanity, and for Farron, has only just begun. It had been a year since the final battle against the Zirin, and Earth had slowly but steadily begun to heal. The scars from the war still marked the land, but the people of Earth had found hope again. They rebuilt their cities, their homes, and their lives. The war, which had seemed endless, had ended. The Zirin had been driven away and Earth had survived, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on the survivors. Captain Jace Farron had given everything to save humanity. He had sacrificed himself, merging with the ancient weapon to unleash its full power and destroy the Zirin forces. And in doing so, he had disappeared. His body was gone, but his power, his presence, remained. Dr. Lena Harris had never fully believed that Farron was truly gone. There were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when she felt his presence, as if he were still watching over them. It was as if the energy from the weapon had not only transformed him, but had bound him to Earth itself. The more she studied the device, the more she realized that the power it had unleashed was unlike anything they had ever encountered. It had changed the very fabric of reality, and in doing so, it had left behind something that defied explanation. Lena stood on a high balcony, overlooking a city that was now thriving once more. The sun set in the distance, casting a golden glow over the landscape. The scars of the war were still visible, but the people had rebuilt. The Earth was alive again, and humanity had proven it could survive even the greatest of threats. But as Lena gazed at the horizon, she could feel it again, the presence. It was subtle like a whisper in the wind, but it was unmistakable. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel the energy that had become so familiar to her. She no longer questioned it. She knew that Captain Farron was still here, in some form. He had become a part of the Earth, a part of its very energy. In the months that followed, the world began to see strange phenomena. People spoke of a presence in the skies, a light that appeared in the distance during storms. Others claimed they saw a shadow moving through the forests, or felt a presence when they were alone. Scientists could not explain these events, but the people of Earth began to believe that the spirit of the captain and the power of the weapon had not vanished. Lena stood by the device once more, her hand resting on its cold metallic surface. She had dedicated her life to understanding its power, but she knew now that some things were beyond comprehension. The energy that still radiated from the device was proof that Farron's sacrifice had not been in vain. His legacy was more than just a memory. It was a living, breathing force that still watched over humanity. As Lena turned to leave, she felt a final, quiet presence. It was a sense of peace, a weight lifting off her shoulders. She knew that Captain Farron was still out there, still part of this world. And she also knew that humanity, with its resilience and strength, would continue to grow, to thrive, and to face whatever came next. The world had changed, but so had humanity, and the legacy of one man, one captain, would never be forgotten.